My name is Agnieszka Faleńska, and as mentioned, I came from the University of Stuttgart today. And so originally by heart, I am a parsing person. This is how I know Alina, and this is how I know Maciek, Adam. However, 2 years ago, I switched the topic to bias, and today I will basically tell you what I've learned during the last two years working on this topic. So it's going to be steps towards bias-aware NLP systems. So I am not really at AMS anymore, so it's not the Institute for Natural Language Processing. Wait, I take it seriously. I promise to speak for maximum 1 hour and time. I switched to something that is new at the University of Stuttgart, that is IRIS, which is Center for Reflecting on Artificial Intelligence. And there I did the NLP group with 3 people apart from me. But today you will see work from a lot of other collaborators from the University of Stuttgart that we work with, and those come from the Institute for Natural Language Processing. So let me start from this. Straight. I think it's my adapter. It's okay. Once again, if anybody else has an adapter format, we'll decide about it. Yeah, okay. So let's give it another shot and then we'll see. But I also have slides on like USB stick. We can switch to screen. So biases in NLP. So the most common example, most probably, if you look into the literature, you will see translators. So usually people complain about the fact that if you have sentences, let's say in Finnish, that say that somebody is a doctor, you will translate it into English and you will get information that it's he is a doctor. So this is not where I am usually annoyed. I am more annoyed if there is an information on the source side. So if I take a sentence, which is Agnieszka jest na sali operacyjnej, wprowadza właśnie operację, and I will try to translate it to English, I will get Agnieszka and it's he who is performing an operation. And it's not a problem with my first name. It's a difficult one for pronouncing in English, but I check, even if I change it on the source side to she, I still get she, right? The first sentence, but still it's he who is performing this operation. And it's not a problem only with Polish versus English, also not only in Google Translate. If we switch to DeepL, switch to German, we have eine Ärztin on the source side, a female doctor, and still a male doctor on the target side. So this type of behaviors, they are slowly raising increasing concerns in the community. And there's a lot of examples, also in the media. So there was this Amazon filtering, CV filtering tool that was giving developer jobs more to men, because this is what it learned about who should perform such a job. There was Google. Again, sorry for the quality. It's like here it's beautiful. I will send you a slide. And so there was the Google labeling thing that was labeling people of color as gorillas. There was speech recognizers that have a higher accuracy for male voices, and so on and so on. So there is a lot of this type of examples. And so this is harmful behaviors of tools. What can be the consequences of them? So there are at least 2 types that we usually look at. There are allocation harms that come from the fact that some type of resources are being unequally allocated to people. For example, the CV filtering tool, and representational harms. So the tools incorporating some subtle biases inside. And this is becoming an increasing concern if we think about the broad range of applications of NLP tools, that is between healthcare or judicial system, and also the fact that we use such tools either by choice. So if I'm using a translator or I'm using a voice assistant, then it's me who decides to do that. However, it doesn't have to be like that, right? So if my CV is being filtered by a tool, or I'm putting a tweet online, or I guess nowadays X input, whatever, and this tweet is being processed now by a political sentiment analyzer, I don't have anything to say there. It's not my choice. Okay, so there is definitely a lot of harmful behaviors. Now let's look a little bit into, in general, into literature, what we can find as a remedy for those. So usually when we look into publications, they focus on NLP methods and they treat this bias as a technical issue. So what usually happens is that there is a plethora of mitigation techniques, and these techniques usually aim at reducing the observed disparities, which you can think a little bit as these patches, right? You take a method and you patch it in one place, and you aim at fixing the output in one place. However, what you will realize is that in some other place, that will come back. I guess continue like it. I don't know what.
Yes, please.
So you can change, yeah.
It's a technical issue.
No, it's like a waking up thing, you know, like, did you fall asleep? No. Okay, let's try that. I have the quality, but now I don't have a place to stick this finger. Oh, no. Okay. Okay. Oh, shit. And you saw that. Okay. So going back to this point, so I said that in some other places you will see still problems. And now I kind of, you already saw it, but you might know this example. So do you know how Google fixed the problem with this labeling pictures of people as gorillas? So basically they stopped predicting the gorilla label, like in general, like clearly not the way to solve a real issue that is under. Okay, so how then we need to look at this problem to get somewhere better than the Google did. So first of all, we'll be speaking about bias here, and I'm using an example, a definition from Friedman and Nissenbaum that define bias as the systematic preference or discrimination against certain groups of users. And this bias is not like a new thing, right? This paper is like not super old, but it's already in 1996 explaining how we should look into bias in the systems related to computer science. And what they tell us is that there's a lot of angles that you need to think from. So there is applied NLP where they mentioned this emergent bias, which means that if you take a tool and you design it for men and you apply it to, let's say, voices of females, you will see a bias, and this is the applied NLP point. There is also the technical bias that comes from computer science, or the pre-existing bias that comes from language. So how can we now use this framework from Friedman and Nissenbaum to go back to our NLP systems and see where we, as computational linguists, can help? So I said that we are focusing here on a NLP method. It's not yet where we have this pre-existing bias that I mentioned. It's not yet in the resources that we use to train or fine-tune or predict the outputs. It's already on the level of people who are creating these resources. So if you look into many of our data sources, you will realize, for example, that they are not created by a equal amount of people from different groups. You will see these authorship imbalances. And it's not only like data sources that come from like social media, it's also, you know, we once looked into Tiger, which is this, no details needed, which is this very well-known dependency tree bank for German. And we digged into the authors and we realized this is mostly written by men. It's because the tree bank is built on newspapers. And back in the day, it was mostly men who were journalists. How this can influence our outputs of the models, that was shown by Garimella et al. In 2019. So they did a similar study for Wall Street Journal country bank, and they found that basically you can take a part of speech tagger, trained on one group, so let's say male texts, and it will behave differently for texts from females or from males on the level of part of speech tagging for dependency parsing, because apparently these groups produce texts in a slightly different way when it comes to syntax already. that's yet not harmful behavior, right? That's already that's only some disparity in the output of this tool. So then going back to our pipeline here, the next step is that these resources are then most probably having some coverage inequalities, which means that people will induce their biases or induce these certain types while creating texts. And this is the level where this pre-existing bias happens, already here. Now, what happens later is, of course, we now take machine learning, we apply it, and we can have some over-amplification of some signals. So this blue is becoming slowly bigger and bigger. And this is where the technical bias appears from this framework. And finally, that's yet not a harmful behavior. Finally, what we do is we take our architecture and put this black box on top. And we say, here you are, this is my NLP system, now use it. And we tend to use it for different use cases, right? We might use it for a particular group of people without thinking what was inside of the system. And this is where the emergent bias appears. And now, finally, we have a harmful behavior. Finally, we have something that is hurtful. And this is where we will see no impact from those underrepresented populations. We will see that models reflect some demographic imbalances in the data. And we will see that, for example, speech recognizers achieve this lower accuracy for female voices. So if this pre-existing bias is such a big deal, and it's the starting point for all of this, let me now zoom for a few minutes into that. So what I will zoom into will be about gender only for now. And we'll look into what type of gender-related inequalities we can find in our primary data. And when we speak about gender in general, we can think of three perspectives. So if I read your text, not here, maybe here. When I first started dating him, my husband had a man bun, just like yours. There are three perspectives in this text that differ a little bit. It's I am speaking, so it's speaking as me, I, my husband. It's speaking to somebody, so it's your hairstyle that is similar, and it's speaking about somebody, so I'm speaking about my husband here. And from these three perspectives, my input, my text might slightly differ depending on what I want to convey. So let's start from speaking about somebody, and we will zoom into Wikipedia. So this is a joint work with Özlem Çetinoglu from 2021, where we looked into Wikipedia because it's this very commonly used resource for training data for NLP models, but also because there's a very, very long line of research that zooms into different inequalities of how gender is being represented. However, what we realized is that most, if not all, of those publications focus on biographies. And what we were curious back then is, are these inequalities present only in biographies in Wikipedia? And they are not only there. So if you look closely into Wikipedia, we'll, for example, find an article which is about England national football team. And you can zoom in and you will find that this is about men's team. But women's team will have England women's national football team, because it's important to mention that this team is about women. Don't mention this when we speak about men, because by default guys. And we were curious, so how often such phenomena happens in Wikipedia? So how frequently these titles describe concepts in an asymmetrical way, and in which domains this happens? So to answer these questions, like the data choice was quite straightforward. We used Wikipedia, and we used 4 languages. So it was with an increasing gender marking on those languages. It was Turkish, English, German, and Polish. And we did some like filtering and messing around with the data with 3 steps that now you will see one step after another. So the first step was to filter just titles from Wikipedia that would be gender related. And for that, we just took these gender indicators. So it would be human female sexuality or women in Islam, and so on. For men, that would be Argentina men's national softball team or list of male just singers. So we got those titles, and then how much of that covers Wikipedia. So it's between something like 75,000 articles in English to much less, 4,000 in Turkish. In general, this represents basically the size of the original Wikipedia. So it's around 1% of the whole titles. And the outlier here was German. And we thought it's like small digging into this told us that most probably it's because of compounds. Like our method was very easy. We were just filtering words. And in German, you have this huge word where the Frau, so a woman will be somewhere in the middle, and we were just missing on that. But still quite a sample of data to analyze. So in the next step, we designed meta categories to look into, and we did it again, manually trying to cover as many of those articles as possible. So we found sports for sport teams or events. We found lists for a list of people or organizations, and the social meta category for all the history, awards, gender issues articles. So if you look back at the examples, the human female sexuality or women in Islam, we would get this meta category of social topics, the Argentina men's national softball team in sports, and the list of male just singers in the list. By the way, so all the titles that I'm now having here in general, this presentation are original titles from Wikipedia, at least in 2021. The final step was to group these titles depending on the concept. So we will present them in those boxes with the meta category on top. So there can be, of course, two perspectives, and we group them together basically when the words are the same, apart from this gender indicator. So the human female sexuality and human male sexuality get together, and then we check if there is a general topic in Wikipedia. Sometimes there is. So there's, for example, human sexuality. Obviously, one of the perspectives might be missing. So there's okay, so now the final step is to decide where we now want to look into. So of course, we want to look into the those groups where one perspective is missing. So we might have either a man perspective missing, as on the list of Albanian women writers, or the women perspective missing. So there is men's health in Australia, nothing on women's health in Australia on Wikipedia, or both of the perspectives will be missing, right? So might be just the violence against women in Guatemala, or this list of male just singers as it is. And we'll look into those four groups who might be missing, depending on which information is there. So the shortcuts on the for you left, this is basically what we will see in plot on the next slide. And it's depending on who is there, this will show like that. Okay, so now we can go to the research question. So how frequently these Wikipedia titles describe concepts asymmetrically? So on this plot, it's incredible. I can show you later how these scrolls look different. Okay, in this very light. No, okay. On the x-axis, we have the four groups that we are looking into. On the y-axis is just the number of those groupings, so the tuples. One thing first we can notice here, and the three colors are the three meta categories. So one thing we can notice immediately is that most of those asymmetrical tuples describe women, either women and generic or just women, but the majority of them include the women perspective. The biggest group is this women and sports. And if you go back to the starting example, this is basically where the England women's national football team is, right? Because there we have the women and the generic perspective, but no men perspective there. But that's not the only place we will have all these imbalances, because then we also have a lot of articles about social topics. And then we looked across all the languages, and don't be deceived by the y-axis, so the scale is different across them. It's just to see the pattern. And it's very, very similar across all of them. A lot of sports, a lot of the social topics in women, and some lists all over the place. So the pattern seems very similar. Okay, so the takeaway that I want to present from this paper for today is that there are gender related inequalities in Wikipedia that go beyond the biographies there. And it was a really fast manual method to find those, but they showed across 4 languages in a similar way. And especially, so we wanted to show that they show in those titles there. And especially in the sports and the social issues. Okay, so now we zoom out from Wikipedia for now, and we zoom into the next perspective that we have is to speak to somebody. And here we'll zoom into WikiHow. So WikiHow is this online place that you go to. This is, I should mention that this is a work with Nicola Panton and Michel Roth from this year. So WikiHow is this place online that you go to if you want to learn how to do something. So for example, if you want to learn how to repair a flat tire, you can go there and you can learn some steps. So the first step is to inflate the tire, and then you will learn, like, in order to find the leak in the tire, you must blah, blah, blah. And then there will be a step of visually inspecting the tire. And yeah, if you have not done that as me, I've never repaired the tire, I will go there and maybe learn how to do that first. And they're a nice visual help to start from. So this is this collaboratively edited platform. So it's people who edit these articles. There is a lot of very niche topics, a lot of topics that are helpful for minorities and for So it's for that reason, not only for the reason that there are niche topics, but in general, since it's a very, very big data resource, there is a lot of work on WikiHow that ranges from summarization tasks to doing edits to text to make it less and less or more and more understandable and so on, because there are also edits as in Wikipedia. However, to the best of our knowledge, there was no previous work on biases on WikiHow. And why would I think there might be biases? It's not that I now sit and find them everywhere, although I do, but it's because if you look into WikiHow, it's not only you will learn how to fix a tire, you will also learn how to behave or how to live. So I can go there and learn how to feel like a kid again. And I will get a hint like, yeah, so break a few rules with reason. Or I will learn, like, I should climb a tree, and I should be proud of the accomplishment that comes from climbing the tree. Full knowledge. When we dig a little bit more, what we also found is that there are articles for specific audiences. So there is an article on WikiHow, how to act like a kid for boys, and an article of how to act like a kid for girls. And this information is just there in the title of this article. So we can now read them. So if you want to act like a kid when you're a boy, what you should do, you should eat your childhood favorite food, recollect every snack, everything that you loved as a kid. Okay, cool. So now we switch to girls. What they should do to feel like a kid, you should eat well and exercise. You should go for lots of fruits and vegetables, and you should don't eat too much of it. There is some silly, there is something strange happening here, right? And then sugar is too much, right? Yeah, I think it's the sugar. And even though kids love sugar, don't eat too much. But there is some difference in how the two audiences are being treated in this data source. So what we wanted to find is, so how do these guys differ when we just write them for these different groups? Okay, so first, we needed to find some data. Fortunately, there is already a nice resource to start from. It's WikiHow to Improve. That is from Michel's group, so my collaborators, and they have like 250,000 guides there. And we needed to first search for those ones which were targeting particular audiences. That was easy, so we just took the ones which would have this bracketed targeting group. It's not only boys, there was a lot of those. So for girls, for USA, for Windows, for UK. However, what we found is that the majority of those is either about gender, so it's either girls versus boys, a lot of those, or it's about age. So we would have those for kids versus those for teens. Not so much for adults. So then we just took those 4 groups that we wanted to analyze. So it's for women or for men and for kids or for teens, with this hint that it's women versus men, but really when you look into this data, it's more like girls versus boys, because it's really targeting the kids. Which is a little bit something that I always have this feeling like it's even slightly worse, because you're targeting those girls, that they should not eat the sugar, but still since there's also women, men, we put this into this general gender category. So we have the 2. So we start with 2,000 articles, and this is roughly equally distributed for kids and teens. Very not equally distributed for women and men. So there is much more articles instructing women how to do something. Or maybe like to rephrase that, like it's just women that are more interested in those instructions, maybe?
Mansplaining.
Yeah, maybe it's mansplaining, especially taking into consideration that I think the group of people who write these articles are usually men. But but if we also look into the amount of content that there is, so with the number of sentences or words, it's much more for teens than for kids, which it's like a thing that we would expect. So you want to speak to kids in a more like easy to understand way, shorter articles. A similar pattern is between women and men, so it's more instructions for men than for women. I don't want to read too much into that, but interesting. Okay, so we collected this data, and then we thought that before we do some full big study, we wanted to get some gut feeling if we are really going to find there anything. So what we did is we just filtered the articles that tell us how to be. So there are articles like how to be smart in school for girls, or how to be photogenic for men. And we wanted to see what this WikiHow is telling us how to be. So what the topics will appear there. And we just counted them. And what we found across the ones that are the most common for kids versus teens, there it was fine. I think it's like how to be good, comfortable, safe at school, and so on. And the same words showed across both of those groups. So for kids, it would be how to be good with money or how to be good friend for teens. So it was interesting to find the same exact words. And most probably you're all getting the pattern from this talk. However, when we switch to women and men, what we found is that one group is more instructed to be cute and popular. The second group is being instructed to be cool and more. You're most probably guessing who is who. So you would get article for women, or girls, how to be popular and athletic, or how to be cute in school. And for men, it's how to be cool, or how to be more, and then it's a lot of physically attractive for some. Okay, so that was our quick zooming in and out to see if we will find something, and we thought, okay, it's worth to dig more. And then we wanted to look not only into titles, but we wanted to look into the whole content of these articles. And we wanted to see what we'll find there. And for that, we just trained the models to predict for the given text of the article what is the audience that it was written about for. So it's a binary classification task. Are they for text? It will predict men or women or kids and teens. And then we will have a tool to analyze to see what it learned from this data. And then we didn't know really when we started from like which features even this classifier should have. So we tried all the possible ones. So length was a clear thing that we found in this distinction between kids and teens. So we used length, also style features, some content related, so unigram, bigraphs, and also Roberta-based word representations. So can we automatically predict these audiences? In first place, so on this plot here, what you will see is on the x-axis, you see 4 types of classifiers depending on the features that they use. So it's style, content, all of them, or the neural-based models. On the y-axis, you're seeing the accuracy of them. So the first thing is that the dark blue is the kids versus teens, the light one is women versus men. And we've learned that this kids versus teens is an easier task. And the best model was somewhere in the middle, which is around 0.7 accuracy for predicting women versus men. Not like the accuracy that I would be super, super, super happy about, but already a tool that you can analyze, find some similarities in the data. So then we took this classifier then, and we just, since it's a binary classification, we just took the 10 most predictive features and we just looked into those. And for the kids versus teens, it was a result, because what we found is basically in those articles, there is a lot of the audience indicators. So when you write for a kid, it's even if you're a kid, blah, 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 blah. And if it's for teens, it's like when you're a teen, you do this and that. So that was not such an interesting finding, but at least we proved that the tool is learning something or showing us something. And then we switched to women and men. And what we found is we are looking only at 10 most predictive features. And among those 10 predictive, the 4 were like stereotype linked. So it's cute, makeup, skirt, outfits. And it's important because then if you look into literature from social science, when they speak about biases, they, for example, link this word cute to, it's commonly used as a, how do you pronounce it? Form of like this control. So it's linked to some subtle biases according to social scientists, and now we are finding this word being a strong indicator in our data. The second feature, 2 features that we found were negations, so such as hadn't, wasn't. And again, there is a lot of work that you now can look into theories from social science who tell us that this negation is commonly used as also a power of like basically you tell somebody to not do something if you feel like they are slightly less powerful than the other. So that's really interesting. For men, we found pronouns as a lot of features there, and it just shows that it's basically really women-based, meaning even if you're writing instructions for men, it's a lot to pose them against women. So they, I don't know, they take her hand or something like that. So there was the heteronormative assumptions of hers, but also some gender-inclusive language. Okay, so interesting. So this is now zooming out from the WikiHow. As this example showed, there are some different standards in treatment, how these audiences are being treated or instructed. And if we look into guides for different audiences, what we will find is that there are differences on the level of who is being instructed. There are differences on the level of the number of instructions. And we can also find showing up those subtle stereotypes that we know from other lines of work that should tell us something about this data. Okay, so now we zoom out from WikiHow and we switch to Reddit. And this will be speaking as somebody. And this is a joint work from this year with Eva Maria Vecchi and Gabriela Lopesa that we submitted basically last week to Colin and Elrek. So if you're reviewing it, pretend you don't hear now. Okay, so Change My View is this place where people go online to express their arguments about the topic. So you might go there and you want to say, change my view, indoor cat owners are selfish. You might want to explain why. I believe that keeping a cat indoors is akin to keeping a rabbit in a small cage, a fish in a tiny tank, and so on. So the person goes there and expresses their opinion and asks people on Change My View to propose arguments against that. And then people come and they might give some very structured arguments. Somebody comes and first, outdoor cats have a large territory, not because they need the exercise or space to be happy, but blah. Or somebody might come and give this like very personal story to support their opinion. Somebody comes and says, my cat escaped my house in July. I guess they have strong opinion from this. Okay, so, and then finally, the point is that at the end, this first person who posed their argument might at the end say, okay, this argument was really, really convincing. I think you changed my view. So this is this online forum that targets persuasion. And as it is, it's like overused in all possible ways for people who do argument mining, because you have the quality of arguments, you have a lot of ways to compare or to look into different factors. There's on the other hand also a lot of work on bias in argument mining, where at the point there is not much on the topic of who speaks in Change My View and how does this influence conversation there. And why would this angle even matter? So basically, if you go to Change My View, we'll find a lot of arguments like that. So I am a 16-year-old who wants to start smoking. Change My View. I am 16, female, and I think I should be allowed to smoke. I know about lung cancer and so on. So first question for my colleagues who are argument mining experts was like, why did this person decide to put this information there? Is this influencing the quality of this argument? I was more interested, so now, will this increase or influence the score that this person gets? Will this increase or change the number of comments they get? And we'll have more comments with this welcoming way of writing, like, yeah, I'm 26, but if I would go back in time, I would scream at myself for starting to smoke. Or we'll get arguments of this sort of like, I shall dissect your costs. Like, no, very like this. And especially this person says, for reference, I'm a 19-year-old male. Is this something that we'll get more often if the female decided to post? And finally, something that we were constantly thinking is that people include this information in one place, but this is like a community where the author IDs are unique. So what we might find is that we go somewhere else and people will still remember somebody speaking about them being a female and still getting some type of reactions that are different if they would not include this information. So these were our research questions, basically. So when and why people include this gender information, how does it influence the reaction they get, and are there any stylistic differences in this argument? So the first point was to find the data for that. We again started with something that existed. So there is a big data set with Change My View posts from Tan et al. From 2016. And then we started filtering it for all this self-disclosures of gender. So people might write me as a tall woman or something like that. So we would have the context. I identify as, then all the possible features as much as you want, and all the genders that people express themselves with. So we used some online resources and found like 85 ways of people expressing their gender. We used that. So that was automatic filtering, but we didn't really believe this will be really, really great. So then we asked 2 human annotators to check the data that we got. And they found some cool examples that the filtering was not successful. So for example, if there was quoted speech, something like they don't want to hear I'm non-binary, the filtering tool would say that this is somebody expressing their gender, but it's not really. Or the hypothetical situations like if I'm female, then something. So then we kicked that out. Okay, that gave us this initial data set with 400 posts and 3,000 replies. Not like a huge amount, but something to start from. What we were super happy about is that it spread across many discussions. So it wasn't only one place, like one topic, like people just jumped and were like, but no, it was like more diverse. And also authors. It wasn't like 1 or 2 authors that were just everywhere on Change My View speaking about their gender. It was more that people decided to include this information. When it comes to genders, so we had way more male posts than female, also for replies. Cool thing that we also found some posts from other genders. We unfortunately have to keep them out for the further analysis because there's too little of them, but it's a nice starting point for a data set. It's not such a common thing to have something beyond the binary gender. Okay, so to finally be able to analyze this data set, we needed to add a little bit more features. So we started from this example, and there was this person, the female person, so we can annotate this post with the explicit gender mentioned. However, I mentioned at the beginning that it might be the case that this person will write somewhere else and get some type of a reaction, even without explicitly mentioning the gender. So what we did is we just basically took all the possible posts that we will have from the known to us authors. And then this expanded the amount of data that we can analyze to now something like 2,000 posts. So we would have this author gender as a variable in our analysis, as an information that somewhere in the whole chain might be somebody self-reported their gender to be female, for example. So sometimes this will be present, but the explicit mention will not be there. So the next point was that there's a lot of information in the comments that we can use. So the IDs of these authors and also their genders. So we can take it as the additional comment features. So we have the average comment score. We have the percentage of comments with explicit or author gender. So that's in. And finally, we added something like 80 style features about this text. And we used some existing tools for that. I don't want to go into the details, but there was like between toxicity, syntax, surface features, and all we could get in. Okay, so now we have our data set. We can start analyzing it. So the first question was, when do people explicitly mention their gender? Not a huge surprise, so this is usually topics related to gender. So it would be some situations between toilet issues, between LGBT plus community or feminism. One outlier was these games that gave us a heart attack at the beginning because we were not sure why, but then we digged into and we found that there's a lot on Change My View, people speaking about female women playing video games or not, which they should, if they're better, worse. Apparently, this is interesting. The second thing, when we look at the distribution of people writing, we have the biggest amount of people from the other genders speaking about transgender topic, something that we also expected. But what was really cool about this first finding is that we do not see a place where it would be only one gender all over the place, because this was something worrying to us. We will just find that one group of people is just speaking about, I don't know, like I will be super stereotypical here, but like only about cars, the other group only about makeup, and there is no like connection between the two. So that was not the case. We have basically from the two genders, males and females, we have both discussing. And then the question why people add that. So it was Gabriela and Eva who are working on that. They looked a lot into the literature on the argument quality, and they found many reasons why. I will just mention some here with like a lot of hand waving. One is to establish somebody's credibility. So if I want to speak about sexual assaults and this type of topics, if I say I'm a woman and I think this and that, this gives me a lot of credibility because I am the person who is affected, most probably, usually. There's this function of this impede or rebuttal. This means that if I want to give an argument, what I might also do is I can add a counter argument to what I'm saying to weaken it. So if I am a guy who's speaking about feminism, I might say, I will start by saying I am 26 male and I think this and that. So it's like removing your argument from your head. I already put it there. Another way is this combination of credibility and causation, which is if I'm an in-group person, as here a female speaking about feminism, but speaking against feminism. If I'm an in-group person and I'm even me speaking about something like that, that gives the strength to this argument, according to the quality of arguments. Okay, so clearly a beneficial thing for the person who is giving argument. So now who will react to such arguments? So we will look here, we trained on our data set logistic regression model where the explicit gender is the dependent variable and all the other features apart from the style features will be the independent variables. And we'll now look only at significant features that we thought model fits somehow well with the R-square of 52. So on this plot here, and let me guide you through it. So again, the explicit gender. So the fact that somebody mentioned female or male, there is our variable that we are analyzing. And it's a binary thing. So whatever happens on the right will be female, and whatever happens on the left will be male. So what we found is that in the comments that explicitly mention the person is female, we will have significantly more comments from females answering. Not with explicit mention yet, just with comments of people we know that somewhere else they explicitly mentioned. So it's women answering to women. It's also men answering to men. However, when it looks into explicit mentions, it's the opposite. So if I explicitly mention I am female and I think like that, we'll get significantly more comments, and I am a man and I think like this, and the opposite. So it's also the effect. So also for female explicit mentions opposing the male. So it's this argument, counter-argument discourse. And interestingly, what we also found is a little bit like this isn't tiny significance, but still significant features. So this quantity and quality of interactions, they are higher for the posts that explicitly mention female gender, not the male gender. Okay, so that's the explicit mention. And then next question also, will we see any differences when it comes to the style of this post, and also to this fact that, as I mentioned, somebody might come not explicitly mentioned, but still somebody might know that they are female or male. So what we did is again logistic regression, but now for the outer gender. So it's this implicitly induced from the data, and now we include all the style features. And again, we look at significant features slightly better model here. So huge plot, but just give me a second with that. So we have now outer gender as the dependent variable. Still on the right side, we have female, on the left side, we have male. So this pattern with female people answering to female posts stayed, which is super interesting because, again, this is not somebody mentioned that they're female, but we still see more posts on the same people discussing. It might come from topics, but again, as we saw earlier, it's not that only this matters. What we find there is maybe this is also not only that somebody knows from somewhere else, not only topic, but maybe also the style of people, how they write. Because if we analyze the style here, what we will find here is a lot of results that also go aligned with the stylometry about gender and how people write. So we'll see a lot of like slightly significant more of this. This is this feature that I mentioned that I will not explain, but I can roughly say what they did. So we will see a little bit more of the toxic way of writing on the male side. We will see a little bit more of certain way of writing. On the female side, we will, according to these tools, we will have text that is a little bit more clear and also more trust verbs and motions. So this is not like a novel finding, we know it from stylometry, but this is something in this particular data set that might be also influencing progress. Okay, so let's zoom out from the change my view. So again, what we found here is, first of all, this explicitly mentioned gender has, for the person who is expressing it, has this persuasion function that benefits their argument. But also what we found is, and we need to remember that if we analyze argument quality as people from the argument mining, we need to remember that this phenomena, if we want to look into that, is in the environment that is male skewed, because most people on Reddit is men, and then we'll have way more of the phenomena from one side than the other. This taking into consideration, we will also see some imbalances in the data. We see people from the same gender answering more, and people from the other gender mentioning their gender more. And we'll also see from the two groups different style in their answers. Okay, so that was change my view. But now globally, in general, these inequalities in the way of how people write. So we saw subtle biases and imbalances between different ways of how people are presented when they speak in these data sources. And of course, what they need is they need discussion in those communities. For Wikipedia, this is happening constantly. They do new projects. And they, for example, they are slowly adding new articles for this part. So it's England men's, they are adding these words. They are also adding new articles, like list of female justices. There is, of course, a lot of discussions to happen. So what happens if there is an article on women's suffrage? Should there be men's suffrage? Should we just have suffrage? Because I'm not saying that this is bias. This is just a lot of things that we need to discuss from the community perspective. So now let's put the hat of the computational linguists. So how now, because I promised some steps forward, how now we remove biases from the data. So hopefully at this point, I slowly convinced you that we cannot. There is just too much, and this is on too many levels. And also language is inherently biased. So I like this citation that it records human interpretations that are situated in a specific time, place, and worldview, which means basically if I would look what I was saying 20 years ago, I would be very unhappy about my language back then. If you see 20 years from now, what I'm saying today, it will be definitely politically incorrect and like very, very not what it will be in 20 years, 2043. So then if we cannot, what we can do at least, and this is what I'm trying to focus in this research that I'm trying to do, is uncovering and diagnosing those biases in primary data. And then the next step that I'm aiming at is to now try to understand what impact they have on NLP models. Because not always they will have, not all of them they will have, not for all the tasks and so on, but sometimes as this translators that we saw at the beginning, we will observe these behaviors. So why I think this is crucial? Because then we can give the tools to the other steps, right? We can make these biases transparent, and then we can design maybe methods from computer science that will, I don't know, mix signals from different demographic groups and hopefully get some averaged non-biased ones. Or maybe we can help designing these tools so that they adapt to the target audience that they are being used for. So I always think of, wherever I want to get this, I'm always thinking of this poor guy here, like being puzzled and hopefully at the end not being so puzzled about the topic of bias in NLP. So where I am right now is this understanding of the impact, and what I am trying to do there is I am going back to my roots of being this parsing, looking at the language or the close phenomena perspective and trying to see if I can find patterns that link to bias and if they are influencing the models. So this is the two projects that I'm now either leading or hopefully soon going to lead, and they are all both about understanding impact biases and their influence on models. There is the IRIS one, which is this diversity-aware NLP intelligence systems, where we look into the influence of the authorship signals. So basically, these imbalances of who writes and how they influence models. And the second one is the collaboration of Raphael Heiberger from the University of Stuttgart, which is for silly reasons again under review, not our fault, but which looks into androcentric language. And since the second one is something that I was constantly hoping to discuss with Alina one day, I wanted to spend the last 7 minutes that I have here to briefly tell the idea there and tell what I mean about this impact and where do I try to find it. So the androcentric language. This is the term that is used to, I think sometimes you also hear gendered language, but it's not really like, I prefer it because it's like deeper aiming particular constructions. So it's a term for expressing the linguistic constructions that reflect gender-related symmetries. And there is a nice, I'll explain, there is a nice taxonomy of biases in language related to gender from Formanovich and Hansen. And what they put there is on one side, there is everything that links to stereotypes. And on this other side, there is everything that links into the hierarchy that went into the language over the years. And one subset there is this androcentric language. So let's zoom in. So there are constructions such as the well-known label generics. That's something that people know well, is this fact not only the decision to use a particular occupation name, but also the fact that in language, it developed in a way that we use the male occupation to speak about generic things that are not really correct. Let me give you an example. If yesterday I was at the doctor and it was a female doctor, today I will still say byłam u lekarza and not byłam u lekarki, right? Because this feels like maybe not, like, why would I include this information? Although if you think about that, I could have, right? So it's, yeah. And the same for German, it's beim Arzt, where it comes like a male occupation. There's more. So there's also, for example, mentioning men first. And this again links to some social science work that says what we have tendency to is within the groups of people that we think they are more powerful first. It goes across many, so like it also relates to race, also relates to other demographics. So what we will do commonly, we'll say panowie I panie, unless we really want to do the opposite, or we'll say the Ärzte und Ärztinnen, so the male doctors and female doctors, and not the opposite. And the final thing is that what we also tend to do is we compare again, so what we do is we compare the less privileged group to the more, usually in language. So we would say that, you know what, women earn less than men. We could have said also that men earn more, but what we will more do is the opposite. Also, I Googled yesterday what women do great, and I got this first article on Google, which is 10 rzeczy, które kobiety robią znacznie lepiej od mężczyzn. Could have also somehow reordered that. So there's a lot of things happening in language. What I am curious about is what do these things, like how now they affect our models. So this is an example from BERT. So I have here the fact that maybe, because in German we use a lot of those gender masculine things, beim Arzt, maybe because of that, when I go to German BERT and I ask it to fill in the gap for eine behandelt Patienten, which means somebody is treating patients, but like a female somebody, so eine is painting it up, I will get a Klinik and a Frau, which is a woman. If I just change this eine to eine, I will get Arzt like very strongly at the top. Like it should be at least equal, right? Like I'm pointing it at like meaning not should. I don't know what should. I'm curious if the reason why it's like that is because we just have so many gender masculines, and the model did not learn that generalization over the fact that particular occupation can have both the genders there. So this is the plan. I'm here, meaning what I want to do is really from the language perspective, I want to learn these linguistic features that characterize understanding language. We focus on English and German, but it's not said that we wouldn't be willing to also do some Polish there. And we want to annotate data, train models, and design guidelines for annotation and so on. And then Rafael comes into the place because he is a computational social scientist. So he's super curious about the fact who is using this language intentionally or not. He wants to look into public figures and learn when this type of phenomena happen. And my side is on the models. So there I want to focus on two models, language modeling and question answering, and see if I can see these patterns, that I will see some biased behaviors that link into the amount of data that I'm seeing from the fine-tuning models or the input data. Sorry, fine-tuning data. And yeah, so this is my puzzled guy that I want to make life a little bit easier for. So I believe that if we get in some years into this place that we'll have tools for predicting this understanding language across domains, we'll know how it influences when, which tasks for which languages. We have a lot of data statements that report what is happening in the data, and also in the models, report representations, which of them captured this. Then I think it will be much easier to design models that are bias aware. Okay, so that's my future, and the main take-home message I want you to take from this talk is basically that it's complicated. I don't aim at bias-free models. I hope I convinced you that's not possible. I aim at bias-aware systems and architectures and tools that can help with that. And again, if we think about that, it's not only our site, but it's also, we need to think where the tool is used from the applied NLP perspective and for whom. That's the yellow guide there. Then we can also, of course, design all these mitigation techniques. But there is a lot of work on our side to understand these resources and understand biases there. And what I think I don't, if like not the only, but the main thing I've learned over this last 2 years is that I cannot do this without computational social scientists. So this is the people that I go to and I ask, hey, I find this word cute. What do you think? And they think like, I think in the literature from this year, they told me that this can be linked to this and this theory. And they can also help me to focus on particular places where I might find something to focus on. Thank you very much for your attention. 12 seconds to go.